My father once looked me in the eye and told me that 85% of my salary belonged to him and my sister. Not, could you help a little? Not, we're in an emergency. 85%. The remaining 15%? According to him, that was more than enough for me. And when I said no, he didn't argue, he didn't try to compromise. He kicked me out. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college, hanging on to my first real job by a thread. And suddenly I had no family, no safety net, and no idea what the next month would look like. All because I refused to hand over my life's work before it had even started. Fast forward a few years. I'd built a career, a home, and a life that finally felt like mine. I was paying my own bills, making more money than my parents ever believed I would. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was actually living. And that's when it happened. One quiet afternoon, there was a knock at my front door. I opened it and saw them standing there, my father, my mother, and behind them, my sister. They looked older, worn down, nothing like the untouchable authority figures I remembered from my childhood. My dad cleared his throat and said, "We need to talk. We need your help." The same man who told me I was selfish for wanting to keep my own paycheck was now standing on my porch, practically begging. But to understand why that moment felt so unreal, you have to know how this all started. You have to go back to the day I sat at a cheap kitchen table, sorting through my bills, thinking I was finally about to start my adult life, and learned that, to my family, I was nothing more than a walking paycheck. When this all began, my life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I just landed my first real job after college, working as a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm in Portland. The salary wasn't anything special, honestly. It barely covered rent on my tiny studio, plus groceries and student loan payments. But every time that paycheck hit my account, there was this quiet rush. I had earned that money. Late nights studying, juggling part-time jobs, graduating with honors, it all finally meant something. Meanwhile, my older sister Natalie had a very different story. She dropped out of college twice, moved back home both times, and married a guy everyone knew was a walking disaster. Travis, her ex, cheated within the first year, drained their joint account more than once, and eventually bailed for someone he met at a bar. By the time their marriage exploded, they had 2 kids, Mason and Olivia, and a mountain of problems. What they didn't have was a plan. That day, I was at my parents' kitchen table, sorting through my own stack of bills during a visit. My dad walked in with that look on his face, the one that always meant a decision had already been made and my job was to obey, not discuss. My mom followed a few steps behind, wringing her hands like she already knew I wasn't going to like what was coming. "We need to talk about your finances," my dad said, sitting across from me. I looked up, a little confused. "What about them?" "Natalie needs help," he said. Like that explained everything. Her divorce is a mess. She can't afford a good lawyer. The apartment she's in is falling apart, and she's got 2 kids to think about. I felt bad for her. I really did. Her marriage had been a train wreck, and the kids didn't deserve any of it. "That's terrible," I said. "But what does that have to do with my finances?" My dad leaned forward, lacing his fingers together like he was about to give a lecture. "Family helps each other. Your mother and I think you should contribute to Natalie's expenses until she gets back on her feet." "Okay," I said slowly. "How much are we talking about?" He didn't flinch. 85% of your monthly salary." I actually laughed. The sound came out sharp and disbelieving. "You're joking." "I'm completely serious," he said, face totally calm. "You're young. You don't have kids. You're in that tiny apartment. You don't need much. Natalie has 2 children who need stability." My mom finally spoke up, her voice soft, but loaded. "It would just be temporary, sweetheart. Just until she finds a job and gets the child support sorted out." I put my pen down and did the math in my head. 85% would leave me with enough to barely scrape, by definitely not enough for rent, food, gas, and loans. "That won't even cover my basics," I said. "How am I supposed to live?" "You can move back home," my dad replied, like it was obvious. "Your old room is still there. You won't have expenses, so 15% will be plenty for gas and personal stuff. And that's when I finally saw the trap. I stared at my dad for a second, and everything clicked into place. Move back home, hand over most of my paycheck, and let them decide what helping looked like. I wouldn't be a son anymore. I'd be an ATM with a bedroom. No, I said. He frowned, like he hadn't heard me right. What did you just say? I said no, I repeated, heart pounding but voice steady. I'm not giving you 85% of my salary. I worked for this. I have rent, loans, food, gas. I'm just getting started. I'm not throwing all of that away. His chair scraped back as he stood up. Your sister is drowning, and you're talking about gas and rent? What kind of selfish man are you turning into? The kind who pays his own bills? I shot back, standing too. Natalie made choices. She married Travis against everyone's advice. She dropped out of school. She refused to work. Those were her decisions. They're not mine to pay for. My mom sucked in a breath like I'd sworn at her. How can you talk like that? The kids didn't ask for any of this. And I didn't ask to be your backup plan, I said. I love Mason and Olivia, but they're not my responsibility. I'm in my 20s. I'm supposed to be building my own life, not funding someone else's mistakes. My dad stepped in close, jaw clenched. If you don't help your sister, you're not welcome in this house. You want to keep your money? Fine. But don't come crying to us when life smacks you in the face. So you're kicking me out because I won't sign over my paycheck? I'm telling you that family comes first, he snapped. If you can't understand that, then maybe you should go figure things out on your own. You have until tomorrow morning. Either you agree or you leave. I looked at my mom, hoping for anything. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I knew. Then I guess I'm leaving, I said quietly. The next morning, I packed my entire life into my beat-up Honda. Clothes, laptop, a few books, and whatever else I could cram into the trunk. My dad stood on the porch with his arms crossed, face carved out of stone. My mom cried in the doorway but never told him he was wrong. Natalie pulled up just as I slammed the trunk. She walked over, arms folded, trying to look sad and defensive at the same time. You're really leaving? She asked. Dad gave me a choice, I said. I'm taking it. I never asked him to do that, she said quickly. He came up with this on his own. But you didn't tell him no, I replied. You didn't say it was too much. You didn't say I shouldn't have to give up my entire income. I have kids to feed, she snapped. Travis left us with nothing. What am I supposed to do? Get a job. File for child support. Do what every other single parent has to do, I said. Don't stand there and act like you're not part of this. You knew what he was asking from me, and you were fine with it as long as it benefited you. That's not fair, she said. Neither is asking me to sacrifice everything I've worked for, I answered. I opened the driver's door. Good luck, Nat. Seriously. I hope things get better. But it won't be with my money. I got in, started the engine, and drove off. I didn't look in the mirror, but I could feel their eyes on my back until I turned the corner. The first year on my own was rough. No dramatic success montage, no overnight glow-up, just grind. I worked 60-hour weeks at the firm, picked up freelance bookkeeping gigs on weekends, and lived in a studio apartment with a heater that barely worked. I ate cheap food, stretched every dollar, and kept a mental spreadsheet of every bill in my head. My salary sounded okay on paper, but after taxes, loans, rent, and basics, there was almost nothing left. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made the dumbest decision of my life. But then payday would hit. The money would go into my account, and for a brief moment, I'd remember it was mine. No one was waiting to skim 85% off the top. No one was dangling a bedroom over my head like a leash. Every bill I paid, every month I survived, was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. It was hard. It was lonely. But it was free. Year 2 looked different. Not easier, exactly, but less like drowning. I'd put in the hours, taken on the annoying projects no one wanted, and quietly made myself useful. My manager noticed. One afternoon, he called me into his office and slid a paper across the desk. Congratulations, he said. Promotion and a raise. You earned it. It wasn't some crazy jump into luxury, but the extra money meant I could finally stop living on the edge of disaster. I moved into a slightly better apartment, still small, but with actual working heat and a door that didn't feel like a strong breeze could knock it down. For the first time, I started building a savings account. It was tiny at first, laughable if you just looked at the number. But to me, it was everything. It was proof I wasn't just surviving month to month anymore. By year 3, things had shifted even more. I got another promotion, this time to senior accountant. My salary doubled from where I'd started. That's when I decided to go for my CPA. 4 brutal exams, on top of a full-time job. My weekdays turned into a loop of office, gym shower, late-night study sessions, and cheap takeout. Weekends weren't much different. People at work would joke, "Do you ever go home?" Sometimes, I'd say, just to prove my furniture still exists. It was exhausting, but there was a kind of satisfaction in it. Every chapter I finished, every practice test I passed, felt like another brick in this foundation I was building. I wasn't just running from my family anymore. I was running towards something. When the email finally came in 4 passing scores, all sections cleared, I just sat there staring at the screen. Then I laughed. One short, disbelieving sound. I'd done it. Not long after that, I landed a job at a more prestigious firm downtown. Bigger clients, higher expectations, much better pay. I upgraded my car to something that didn't sound like it might die on uphill turns. I took a short trip to the coast and stayed in an actual hotel instead of some sketchy shared room. I opened a retirement account and started putting money in regularly. To some people, those things are normal. For me, they were milestones. Each step was a quiet, personal reminder. Walking away from that kitchen table had cost me my family, but it gave me my life. Year 4 was when everything shifted from doing okay to this is actually my life now. By then, I'd settled into the new firm. The work was intense, but I liked it. They didn't care where I came from, who my family was, or what drama I'd left behind. They cared about numbers, deadlines, and whether you showed up when it mattered. One of our biggest clients was a fast-growing tech startup that had outgrown its own systems. Their books were a mess, their reports were inconsistent, and they were expanding faster than they could track. The partners needed someone to step in and fix it. They picked me to lead the project. I remember sitting across from the senior partners, waiting for the bad news, another grueling assignment, some impossible target. Instead, they said, "We trust you with this. Don't make us regret it." So, no pressure. For months, my life became that startup. I was in their office constantly, mapping out processes, rebuilding how money flowed through their entire system. I managed a small team, coordinated with their executives, and fielded questions at all hours. It was brutal. 16-hour days, late nights staring at spreadsheets until the numbers blurred. But I thrived. The startup CEO, Lauren, was one of those people who seemed to run on pure energy and caffeine. One night, after a particularly long meeting, she pulled me aside. "You remind me of myself 10 years ago," she said. "Hungry, focused, refusing to accept the limits other people set for you." I didn't tell her about my father, or the 85%, or the front-to-porch ultimatum. I just said, "I appreciate that," and meant it more than she probably realized. When we wrapped the project ahead of schedule and under budget, the partners called me back into their office. I figured they were going to throw another massive client at me. Instead, they offered me junior partnership. At 28, I became one of the youngest partners in the firm. The salary bump was huge. The equity meant I had a real stake in the place, not just a job. I walked out of that meeting in a daze, sat in my car in the parking garage, and just breathed. 5 years earlier, my dad had told me I didn't need much, that my money was better used on someone else's life. Now I was making more in a month than I'd made in an entire year back then. With the new income, I upgraded again, this time to a small 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing insane, no marble fountains or home theater, just a solid, comfortable place with good light, a small yard, and enough room to breathe. I didn't technically need 3 bedrooms, but I wanted the space. An office, a guest room, options. On moving day, my friend Brenda showed up with pizza and a bossy attitude. Danielle and Kesha, two women I'd met through volunteering at the shelter, came too. We hauled boxes, argued about furniture placement, and made jokes about me turning into a real adult. At one point, Brenda stood in the middle of the living room, hands on her hips, and said, "Look at you. Career, house, stability. You did this." "We did this," I corrected, nodding toward everyone. "None of us got here alone." That night, after they left, I walked through the house in the dark, room to room, bare walls, echoing footsteps. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel. Peace. No one could threaten to throw me out of this place. No one could demand a cut of the mortgage payment. This was mine. Every square foot paid for by hours I chose to work, not obligations shoved onto me. My social life shifted too. I started dating a bit, nothing too serious, but I wasn't avoiding it anymore. I'd meet someone for dinner, talk about work, hobbies, weekend plans. Whenever the topic of family came up, I kept it simple. "We're not close," I'd say. Complicated history. Some people pushed, others didn't. The ones who respected the boundary usually made it to a second or third date. I also leaned deeper into the community I'd found through volunteering. Helping women rebuild their finances after leaving controlling or abusive situations wasn't just a side thing anymore. It mattered to me. I knew what it felt like to have someone try to use money as a leash. I knew what it meant to choose freedom, even when it almost broke you. Those women, Brenda, Danielle, Keisha, and others, became a different kind of family. We celebrated small wins. A better job, a cleared debt, a safe apartment. We were connected by something stronger than shared blood. We chose each other. Success didn't automatically fix everything in my head. If anything, it made some things louder. On paper, my life looked great. Good job, nice house, stable income, solid friends. But certain days still hit like a punch. Holidays, especially. Thanksgiving and Christmas used to mean crowded tables, loud voices, and my dad at the head like some kind of king. Now they meant quiet mornings and carefully planned distractions. I'd spend Christmas morning at the women's shelter, helping serve breakfast, wrapping small donated gifts for kids, talking with moms who were trying to hold it together. In the afternoon, I'd head to Brenda's place, where her family had basically adopted me. Her parents treated me like another son. Her mom always made sure there was a seat for me, a stocking with my name on it, leftovers packed up for later. It was kind. It was warm. And it hurt in a way I didn't talk about much. One Christmas Eve, I was in their kitchen helping dry dishes. Brenda's mom glanced over at me and said, "You don't have to tell me what happened with your family. But whatever it was, it's their loss. You're a good man. Any parent should be proud to say they raised you." I had to put the towel down and step outside. The cold air hit my face as I stood on their back porch, watching my breath fog in the dark. For a long time, I'd told myself I was fine. I'd left. I'd survived. I'd won. But standing there, I finally let myself admit what I'd never really said out loud, even in my own head. I was grieving. Not for the version of my parents who actually existed, the ones who saw me as a resource, not a person. I was grieving the parents I'd wished I had. The dad who would have been proud of my promotions instead of angry about my boundaries. The mom who would have stood up for me instead of looking at the floor. I grieved the reality that my sister had chosen the easier path, letting our parents fight her battles, letting someone else pay the price. I grieved the years of holidays, birthdays, and random Tuesday nights that would never happen. Most of all, I grieved the younger version of myself sitting at that kitchen table, thinking, "We need to talk about your finances," was going to be a normal conversation. He had no idea how much it would cost him to say no. After that Christmas, something in me settled. The hurt didn't vanish, but it changed. It stopped feeling like an open wound and started feeling like a scar tender sometimes, but no longer raw. My parents had made their choice the day they told me I was only welcome if I came with a paycheck attached. I'd made my choice when I packed my car and drove away. Both of those things could be true. Both of us could live with the consequences. So I went back to my life, to mentoring younger accountants who reminded me of myself, to volunteering at the shelter and talking people through budgeting and bank accounts, to dinners with friends who actually showed up because they wanted to, not because they needed a favor. For the first time, I wasn't just proving something anymore. I was simply living. As my 30s crept closer, my relationship with money changed again. When I left home, money felt like survival. Later, it became proof. Proof that I'd been right to walk away. Proof that I could build something on my own. Now, it started to feel like something else. A tool. With partnership money coming in and my expenses under control, I sat down with a financial advisor. We went over everything: savings, investments, retirement, insurance. For the first time, I wasn't asking, how do I make it to next month? I was asking, what do I want the next 20 years to look like? We built a plan. Diversified investments, solid emergency fund, aggressive retirement contributions. The kind of structure I'd been giving to clients for years finally turned inward. Once I felt stable, I started thinking about what I could do beyond my own life. I increased my donations to the women's shelter. Not just writing a check once a year, but setting up regular support. I started a small scholarship fund for women going back to school after financial hardship. It wasn't massive, but it was real. Books, fees, part of tuition enough to make a difference. When Keisha wanted to expand her cleaning business, I offered her an interest-free loan. She stared at me like I'd just handed her a winning lottery ticket. You don't have to do this, she said. I know, I told her. That's why I want to. Helping other people get free from the same kind of financial control I'd escaped felt better than any promotion. It was like taking the weapon my father tried to use on me and turning it into armor for other people. Around this time, my Aunt Paula reached out. My mom's younger sister. I'd always liked her growing up, but she drifted away once things went nuclear with my parents. She suggested lunch at a cafe downtown. When I walked in, she was already there, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, looking both nervous and determined. I'm not here to guilt you or drag you back, she said right away. I just wanted to say, I think you did the right thing. I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear that until she said it. What your father asked for was insane, she went on. 85% from your first job? I told them over and over it was wrong. We had some pretty ugly arguments about it. Did you tell them that? I asked. Many times, she said. Your mother would cry. Your father would get defensive, and I'd be the bad guy for saying they were exploiting their own son. Eventually, they stopped inviting me to things. I sat there, letting that sink in. For years, I'd assumed everyone in the family either agreed with my parents or didn't care enough to say anything. Knowing someone had pushed back, even if it hadn't changed the outcome, meant more than I expected. You're not crazy, she said quietly. And you're not cruel. You drew a line they never should have forced you to draw. On the walk back to my car, I felt something loosen in my chest. It didn't fix the past, but it reminded me that I hadn't been the problem for refusing to be used. By the time I turned 29, my net worth was higher than anything I'd imagined when I was eating ramen in that drafty studio. I didn't feel smug, just steady. My parents had tried to keep me small by telling me I didn't need much. I'd grown anyway. And just when I'd fully settled into this new version of my life, the past decided to knock on my door. Literally, it was a regular Saturday afternoon. Laundry in the washer, some mindless show playing in the background, emails half answered on my laptop. Then came the knock. Not a quick, casual tap. A firm, deliberate knock that instantly put me on edge. I opened the door and froze. My dad stood on the porch, shoulders slightly hunched instead of squared like I remembered. My mom was beside him, clutching her purse strap like it was a lifeline. Behind them, a few steps back, was Natalie. For a second, none of us spoke. Hey, I said finally, keeping my voice neutral. What are you doing here? My dad cleared his throat. We need to talk, he said. We could use your help. There it was. Not, we miss you. Not, we're sorry. Help. I stepped aside just enough to avoid being rude, but not enough to invite them in. They took the hint and stayed on the porch. What's going on? I asked. My mom started talking first. Things had been hard. Natalie's situation hadn't really improved. Travis was still ducking child support. My parents were older now, health not great, bills piling up. As she spoke, the picture came into focus. Debt, late payments, medical expenses. Natalie still leaning on them. My dad finally jumped in. "You're doing well," he said. Like that was a crime. "You've got a good job, a house. We thought maybe you could help the family out, just until we get back on our feet." I looked at him for a long moment. "Help how?" I asked. "Be specific." He shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe you could cover some of our debts. Lend us money for a while. Help with Natalie's bills. You know. Step up. You're the one who made it." There it was again. That old expectation. That assumption that my success was community property the second they decided they needed it. "Do you remember the last serious conversation we had about my finances?" I asked him. He stiffened. "That was a long time ago." "Do you remember what you said?" I pressed. He didn't answer. "You told me that if I didn't hand over 85% of my paycheck, I wasn't welcome in your house," I said calmly. "You said family comes first, and you made it clear I didn't count as family unless I came with money attached." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "That's not fair," she whispered. "We were under so much stress. We didn't know what to do." "You knew exactly what you were doing," I replied. "You had a problem, and instead of owning it, you tried to make me the solution. When I said no, you threw me out." Natalie finally spoke up. "Look, can we not rehash the past? The kids need stability. Mom and Dad are drowning. You can afford to help. Why are you acting like this is some huge ask?" "Because it is," I said. "You're not asking for a little help. You're asking me to step back into the role you all tried to force on me years ago. The walking paycheck. The backup plan." "So that's it?" my dad snapped. "You're just going to stand there and watch your family struggle?" I took a slow breath. "I've watched my family struggle my entire life," I said. "And every time, the solution was the same. Someone else sacrifices so Natalie doesn't have to. You chose this pattern. You pushed me out when I refused to play along." "So you won't help at all?" my mom asked, voice shaking. "I'm not taking on your debts," I said. "I'm not funding Natalie's life. If you want resources, I can connect you with financial counselors, legal aid, programs that actually exist to help in situations like this. But I am not your bank." Natalia scoffed. "Wow, all that money and you're still this cold." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally warm. I'm finally safe. And I'm not giving that up." My dad's face hardened into something familiar. The same look he'd had on the porch all those years ago. "I always knew you'd turn your back on us," he said. "You turned your back first," I replied. "You just didn't think I'd survive it." Silence stretched between us. "You should go," I said, hand on the door. "I hope you find a way through this, but it won't be on my shoulders." My mom started to say my name, but my dad put a hand on her arm and shook his head. They turned and walked down the steps. Natalie gave me one last look, anger, disappointment, maybe a hint of fear, and then followed them. I closed the door gently. No slam, no dramatic collapse. I walked into my living room, sat down, and let the quiet settle. Years ago, losing them had felt like the end of the world. Now, it felt like confirming something I'd already known for a long time. Family isn't the people who share your last name. It's the people who don't threaten you when you tell them no. It's the ones who show up without a bill attached. For the first time, I realized I wasn't that scared 20-something at the kitchen table anymore. I was a man who had built his own life, his own stability, and his own family chosen piece by piece. And this time, when someone tried to cash in on my existence, I had the power to close the door. So that's where I am now. My dad once told me I didn't need much, that my paycheck was better off propping up someone else's life. He thought I'd fold, move back home, and spend my 20s paying for choices that weren't mine. Instead, I walked out with a beat-up car and a couple of boxes and ended up with a career, a home, and a life that exist because I refused to be used. I'm not going to pretend it didn't cost me anything. I lost my parents in every way that matters. I lost my sister long before they ever showed up on my porch. There are holidays that still sting, quiet mornings that feel a little too quiet. But I also gained something I never had before. I gained friends who show up with pizza and trucks on moving day without asking what's in it for them. I gained coworkers and mentors who see my value in the work I do, not in how much of my paycheck they can claim. I gained a community of people at the shelter in my life who know what it means to walk away from control and build from nothing. Most importantly, I gained the ability to say no. No to guilt trips disguised as family. No to being the emergency fund for people who never learn from the emergencies. No to sacrificing my future just to make someone else's present more comfortable. If my parents ever decide they want a relationship that isn't built on money, I might be open to a conversation one day. Maybe. But I won't go back to being the guy at the kitchen table who thinks love is something you prove by emptying your bank account. So now I want to ask you, if you were in my position, kicked out for refusing to give up 85% of your salary, then approached years later, when you're finally stable, what would you do? Would you open the door and your wallet? Offer limited help with strict boundaries? Or close that chapter for good? Let me know what you think in the comments. Was I wrong for refusing to help them now, after everything that happened? Or was walking away the only way to finally protect the life I fought so hard to build? And if you like hearing real stories like this about boundaries, family, and choosing yourself, don't forget to subscribe, drop a like, and stick around for the next one. Because trust me, there are plenty more stories where this came from.